Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for The Bad Batch Season 2 Episode 3. And I think it's fair to say, I think I've seen this across the board, with every reaction I've seen to this episode. This was just objectively a vastly better episode to both of the first two episodes, the first two-parter for Season 2. And I hope it's not just the case where, look, the Bad Batch is going to do the Bad Batch things and the main characters are just kind of stuck in this kind of loop where, unless they're literally just around other more interesting characters, they can't really be interesting themselves. I hope that's not the case. I think once they get more involved in sort of rebel stuff and they begin to connect the plots a little bit, the Bad Batch themselves will become a little bit more interesting. But this episode was strong because I think consistently in like the first season, this was far and away the most interesting plot. The clones that are basically left loyal to the Empire, and we're gradually seeing them get phased out. And that's the whole point of like Rampart, as like the guy who basically wants to get rid of them sooner rather than later. And especially with how this episode ends with Cody going AWOL, and then Crosshair is basically being alerted by Rampart to the idea that, hey, there's not many clones around anymore. Like, how does that make you feel? And then he walks out into the corridor, and I think he's the only clone, even though there's like a bunch of characters on screen. And that's a very, very interesting plot, because we're waiting to see, in a way, like, is this just a slow phase out and they just gradually, there's no big event and they just gradually fall away? Or is there going to be some big thing where, like in sort of like older kind of continuity, we see the Empire basically, eradicate the remaining clones because they can't trust their loyalties anymore? Because when Cody is introduced in this episode, he highlights that there's rumors going around that a lot of clones are beginning to doubt basically like the direction of the Empire. Like their morals effectively, I suppose, from interacting with the Jedi and what they were as the Republic, are coming back more heavily, and they're beginning to kind of fade away, disappear and stuff like that. And so that's a super, super interesting plot point, because I think we want to eventually see what leads to the full transition to stormtroopers and like there basically being no clones anymore. What exactly happens there? And so this episode, where you actually gave good character development for both Cody and Crosshair, was really strong. Because Cody, I think, depending on like where you are in the fandom, could be this character who you either view as being maybe a little bit more of a dull clone who maybe isn't developed, or you actually view him as being one of the best developed of sort of the normal clones. That, okay, he doesn't quite have the same personality as maybe like a Rex or some of Anakin's squad, but for being a more, follow the rules kind of like commander character, Cody always to me stood out as being like he had one of the best relationships with his Jedi General, Obi-Wan. And so it was fantastic in this episode to actually see bits and pieces of sort of like Obi-Wan come out in Cody, because the whole way he did the negotiation at the end with Tawny Ames was full on Obi-Wan. That's the way Obi-Wan would typically handle situations. That's why his nickname in the Clone Wars was the Negotiator. And you can see Cody doing that here against what the Empire would typically do. And he was shocked, and it obviously led to him going AWOL, was that immediately upon resolving the situation in a peaceful way by negotiating, the Empire governor guy, immediately was like, now execute her. And he couldn't go through with it, but Crosshairs did. And there's that kind of highlight across the episode that, like, I think you saw a little bit of like Crosshairs growing to really respect Cody. And of course, Cody just being happy to have sort of like an expert, unique clone on his team, where some of the other clones were like, he's one of the Bad Batch, basically, that we don't want him on the team. But Cody just used him effectively and was able to work properly with him. Like Obi-Wan often was able to like incorporate like stuff like that into his plans quite nicely. So that was good. And so when you get to that end scene, and it's like, and I really like the dialogue here as well, where he's like, why not Commander Cody? Like, why are you sending me off with a different clone commander this time? Why not Cody? We were so successful last time. And Rampart's like, who's Cody? And Crosshair's immediately just like, oh, this guy doesn't like clones. And he's like, oh yeah, CT2224. And he's like, oh yeah, that guy, because he only knows them by numbers. He doesn't care about their names and purposefully like refuses to name any of them. So that kind of highlights, that's the strength of like Rampart as a character, given what he did at the end of the opening two-parter, killing that commander to save himself basically. And now more of a sense of like, okay, like I'll use you while you're still fully loyal to us, but ultimately I don't really care about the clones. And that's his approach. And just all these little subtle moments that you're kind of seeing in the same way that I suppose Crosshair sort of saw, and when he learned Cody went AWOL, realized that like, oh, if even someone like Cody, who is typically the by the rules guy, is leaving like other clones are, where does that place me? And especially because like Cody, the last thing Cody said to him, reflecting on things, was like, it's all about the choices you make and living with them. And it's like, has Crosshairs made the right choices in like early parts of the first season, late parts of the first season? And it's really planting the seeds that like, okay, it seems like already Cody, who maybe you would think going into this season would have been one of the kind of tougher nuts to crack in terms of he will finally come over to the good side of things. Actually making the decision to turn him, we guess it's a full turn, this early on, is a really good move, because it will put more pressure on Crosshairs to finally, in a way, make his decision. Because I think there was maybe a slight bit of surprise that they actually kept Crosshairs on the Empire side of things after all the build-up from the first season. So I actually like the way they did this, because I'm really intrigued to see Cody turn up again. Because, okay, he could join up with Clone Force 99, the Bad Batch. That's one way to do it. But I think what they really should do is have him meet up with Rex, because I would love to see those two talk about things now that they're sort of both theoretically on the right side, if that's the way they go with it. And because of the significance of like it's Obi-Wan and Anakin's clone commander, that would be a huge thing to just see where exactly that all goes. And it would really help to characterize Cody a little bit more, because Rex is pretty much like one of the most developed clones that we have. So getting kind of Cody on that side of things as well would be pretty interesting, because what was so significant about this episode was that I believe this is like the first content involving Cody set after episode 3. So because he is a significant clone, being Obi-Wan's commander, there was a want to just see what happens. And while they don't directly reference Obi-Wan in this episode, I think you can tell that a lot of what he says and how he acts is informed by having previously been relatively close to Obi-Wan. Like I said, with the negotiation, and then the discussion about choices and stuff like that, Order 66 and how the clones took it. He obviously followed it. We know, of course, that with the inhibitor chip, like at that moment when it's activated, that's the hardest time for a clone to kind of work against the chip. And obviously he wasn't able to fight it at that time because of where they were. No one was aware of it, and Obi-Wan was just heading off and with the timing. But I suppose the idea is that he at this point still feels like he technically killed like Obi-Wan, making that order. So as we go forward, I suppose him potentially finding Rex and maybe like the discovery of like all of this stuff could be like super interesting, especially if like Cody like finds out that like some of the Jedi are alive and so on. That's a very interesting kind of point for me. With the Crosshairs stuff, it's interesting because like I'm a little worried that are they going to do the same thing as season 1 again, where where it's like an entire season of Crosshairs kind of having these ups and downs, doubts, conflict with the Empire. It feels like you have to make your decision in an arc this season. Like we can't have it go on longer than this. We have to see where this character is going. But like I said, he's the most interesting main Bad Batch member, and he's not even part of the team currently. So that you have to give the credit there for a good character arc. As for the plot of this episode, this is definitely on the weaker side of things. It made more for just a backdrop for the characterization, I think, to happen, rather than the plot itself being anything like super interesting, because it was just more of showing how the Empire deals with things, and that they don't have any room for negotiation with systems that do want to be independent. So they just go in and, you know, deal with things in the most violent, brutal way possible. So the kind of reveal here of Tawny Ames and like what her whole thing was that they revealed that she was one of the, I guess, senators at the time who agreed with the plot from the Clone Wars, where a lot of the senators on both the Republic and Separatist side of things actually sort of agreed to sort of peace talks effectively in the middle of the war. And obviously it was shut down by like machinations by like Palpatine and so on. It's revealed that she was actually part of that and had hope for peace, but has lost that in the formation of the Empire, the treaty basically kind of falling apart and all this stuff. That actually made for a character who was only around for this one episode. I don't think we'd actually like heard about her before. It was her debut, but they sort of retcon in that she was part of the negotiation stuff previously. I thought they made for like a decent arc of like, it explains why this character would have this turn more towards like peace and negotiation doesn't really work, so I have to use violence. The fact that she was using sort of reprogrammed battle droids as her army, I thought was kind of somewhat fitting as like a separatist, like she was. And it made for like a cool action set piece for a lot of the episode, seeing clones versus the droids again. And especially like getting to see sort of a very standard clone unit led by Cody, but incorporating one kind of like oddball character in Crosshairs, where you got to see some of him in action again, in case you forgot some of his like techniques and his sniping ability. There was probably a little bit too much action, whereas I probably would have preferred there to be a little bit more dialogue, character scenes, because that was such a strength in the episode. But that is this show. I think this is very much the action-centric show on both sides of things. Both when they do the Empire focus and when they do the Bad Batch focus. They want to do the action in this way. And it was pretty good. Like the fight up the stairs against the, what are they called? Like assassin droids. I thought was pretty good with the reflecting up the spiral staircase. And then it basically all builds up to the negotiation with Tawny. And again, what I liked here was that like Cody was able to actually like negotiate the situation down. So they did resolve it without violence, and he sort of temporarily got her to believe in the idea of peace again. But of course, the Empire has these awful people in charge, and immediately it's turned around. And the fact that like Crosshairs was the one to fire the trigger, and I guess this is the thing that got him back slightly in Rampart's good books, whereas previously he was kind of like, okay, it's sort of lucky you survived like being there for like a month, but you're not allowed to lead anymore. But now here he's been put on another team, so maybe they're building up to like he might be able to be put in a position of leadership again. Maybe something else will go wrong, he'll get demoted again, and that will be a big signifier to him that like, okay, they don't really care about me. But I think that's the main thing, is that from the first two episodes I get basically no sense on the Bad Batch side of things where the Bad Batch are going, other than this slight conflict over like, you know, are we trying to defeat the Empire as a team, or are we just trying to protect Omega? Like there is that slight conflict that they brought up. Here, though, on the Empire side of things with Crosshairs and the clones and stuff like that, there is a sort of more clear trajectory because they're doing stuff with the characters and there's more clear-cut arcs. And I think that does make the episode feel much stronger than the first two-parter did just feel like sort of like two Bad Batch episodes by the numbers, with a little bit of some nice references thrown in with the Dooku stuff. Otherwise, like, it really wasn't that strong. So I'm hoping we get more episodes that are like this. I'm hoping they're able to do stuff that's more interesting with the Bad Batch characters themselves. Because like I was saying, I think in the review last week, as well as what I said in some of my reviews at the end of season 1, it's like, are the Bad Batch characters, you know, Hunter, Tech, Wrecker, you know, those characters, and Omega, are they strong enough on their own to hold like the main character positions of a show? And it's been like okay up to now, but they need to do something on that side of things. And I think from the trailers and stuff like that, I don't think we have a massive sense, apart from like a couple of incidents, what necessarily the full plot of the season is, and if there is any trajectory for the Bad Batch group outside of just random missions episode by episode. So I want to see more of a sense for where we're going with on that side of things, because I assume we're going to immediately return back to that side of things, whereas again the contrast with this episode being so strong, despite you could actually level some complaints at it for probably being like, you know, 66% action scenes and the good stuff being confined to a relatively small amount of the episode. But they did such amazing work with that small amount of character time they had. That was the point. So they're my thoughts on the episode. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this one, as well as what I had to say about it. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.